You can be a successful speaker without ever seeing your audience. For too long now, the speaking world has been siloed into a jet-set lifestyle of corporate boardrooms and hotel ballrooms. The path of a speaker has opened up thanks to video. But you need to get it right. That's going to take time, but I've got a few tips for you in this video to get you started. One of the things that holds so many people back from getting started with video is they think they need to have everything in place to look professional and cool. At the moment, for example, I've got my nice halo light, I've got a fairly decent backdrop, I'm recording in HD. By the way, that's just the phone. All phones nowadays record in HD. But that wasn't how I started filming videos. I used to just turn on my webcam using the basic webcam program on my computer, and I just talked into that. And the presentation was not fluent, it was not articulate, it was not succinct. I rambled on, I had this stiff wooden appearance, I had a bit of a monotone in the voice, and I would just speak like this. It was not glamorous at all in the beginning. I wasn't thinking about how I looked, I wasn't thinking about if I was getting my point across the most effective way, and that's actually a good thing. Because I knew at the beginning that those weren't the things to worry about. I knew in the beginning all that mattered was pressing. Just goes to show you're never perfect. All that mattered was pressing that big red button and starting to speak. And that's really what I'm encouraging you to do. If you're not filming video right now, it's just a case of turning on the big red button and starting to speak. All of the speaking dynamics, your technique and your skills, they're going to come in later. But so many people don't even take that first step of committing themselves to the process of recording video, and so they're never going to get better. How did you get your driving license? You had to do driving lessons, didn't you? How do you think you're suddenly going to be amazing on camera if you never take those lessons and have that practice with the big red button on? So with that in mind, I've got 3 tips I'm going to share with you today that are going to help you get in the game with video, are going to give you the learning process of how to get better on video, and ultimately, if you follow these 3 tips, you're going to create a learning loop that's going to help you appear amazing on video. Not next week, not next month. It might take a few months if I'm honest, it certainly did for me, but you'll look back on some of those first videos that you did and go, wow, boy have I changed. Man, am I better on video than I used to be. And that's the spark that we want. That's the reflection that we want. So let's launch into what are the 3 tips that are going to allow you to have that lovely look back and have a little bit of smugness. Tip number 1, 1 stands for 1 take. You've got to record your video in 1 take. And this is a mistake so many people make at the beginning of their filming journey. Is they get a couple sentences in and they flub a line or they forget what they're going to say and they stop recording, go back and they try and do it again. Here's the problem that happens then. What you're doing is training yourself to stop when you make a mistake or when you flub a line. The analogy that I use here is, can you imagine stopping running every time you got out of breath? As soon as you feel a little bit out of breath, you stop running. Are you ever going to get a better runner if you keep on stopping there? You're not, are you? And the reason for that is when you start to get out of breath, that you're actually starting to build your cardiovascular fitness. That's when you need to keep on running, not stop running. And it's the same with filming video. When you make a mistake or flub a line, that's when you need to keep on going because you're pushing through making mistakes. You're pushing through making errors. Do you remember what I did in the last section when I was talking about pressing the big red button and I said pressing the big red button? I didn't go, oh no, that's it, I've ruined it, the take's over. I just kept on rolling with that. And I kept that as my final take. And actually, I think that's a really good demonstration of what I'm teaching here, is that it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to make errors. The main thing to do is just get through, get from the start of what you want to say to the end of what you want to say. And if there's a lot of mess in between, you can do some editing on that. You can just chop out pieces where you forgot what you're going to say, or you stumbled over a line, and there might be some chunks where you take out and you go, oh, basically I started rambling there and I just sort of told the same story again in a slightly different way, or I really just rehashed the same message. That's something that I used to do a lot, was just rambling and saying the same thing in lots of different ways. You can cut those bits out in the edit and you can create a video that's a little bit smoother ultimately when you release it. And it might look a bit sort of choppy and suddenly you're there and then you're speaking here and then you're looking there and then you're suddenly looking there as you're speaking. You're a little bit closer and then suddenly you pop further away. It might look a little bit jumpy and messy, but that's okay. Because guess what? When you're running and you're out of breath and you're sweaty and muddy, that's a little bit messy as well. But is it good for you? Absolutely. Is filming your videos in one take good for you? Absolutely. If you thought tip number 1 sounded uncomfortable, wait until you hear tip number 2. Tip number 2, no script. No script for your videos that you're filming. Again, this was a mistake that I used to make. When I was using that webcam, I thought, I bet I could have a Word document on the screen and I could read off that document and it would pick me up on the camera. And what I very quickly realized is the camera can tell if you're not looking at it. If I'm reading off my screen right now, so here's what you've got to do. You've got to speak without a script, because speaking without a script is really important. You can tell, can't you? So as well as not having a script that you're reading off, I could have little things posted around my halo light right now, big sheets of A4 paper that I just read off. The camera will tell if you're trying to read off things. You can't escape it. So firstly, you can't get away with it. Secondly, it's also not any good for the quality of your video. The second thing that I tried when I realized I couldn't read off the screen was just to write out that script and shove it in my head and memorize it. And that also creates a terrible quality as well. When you're memorizing, you're speaking from your head. You're trying so hard to remember the next thing to say, how you articulated the next point. And as soon as you miss a link from one sentence to the next, you're floundering, you're stuck, because your memorization depends on remembering it word for word, line for line. You don't remember the broad picture of the speech. You don't remember the broad concept of the speech. And it creates this very wooden and stiff performance, even if you manage to pull it off. And I was managing to pull it off, but it didn't look good on camera. So you've got to learn to speak without a script. And now I'm not saying that you don't prepare at all for your videos. I prepared for this one, but you prepare broad ideas. You have a word or a phrase that captures deeper meanings for you. If we look at this video, for example, I'm just doing this in little sections. So one of the sections, for example, is introducing the idea of video. And that's what you saw at the start. talking about how you can be successful without seeing your audience, about talking about the traditional model of speaking, of corporate boardrooms and hotel ballrooms. All of that was just encapsulated in a couple of phrases. Telling the story of how I began speaking on video. That was literally just my story of video. The previous point of one take, I just did that entire section using one take as my stimulus. So why do you want to film in one take? Why is it important? When do people not film in one take? And how does that affect speaking? Here, no script. I don't have a script. I'm just saying, okay, I'm going to speak about why you don't want to use a script, what happens when you use a script, and what's the alternative for using a script. And this is the alternative, using keywords and key phrases. And you can have some of these keywords and key phrases as prompts. For example, on my halo light that I've got here, if you have a halo light, you could put little post-it notes and sticky notes with some of your key ideas of, okay, I'm going to share 3 things about gut health, for example, if you're speaking about nutrition. So I'm going to have the first thing here, probiotics. I'm going to have the second thing here, gluten. I'm going to have the third thing here. What could be the third thing about gut health? I'm not enough of an expert to know, but you're enough of an expert to know. So they could be your prompts. And you can say, okay, I'm going to go from the first point, which is talking about probiotics. I'm going to go for the second point, speaking about gluten. I'm going to go for the third point. If you're a gut health expert, please let me know in the comments. What's the third thing I could say about gut health? Leaky gut syndrome. I'm struggling here. But you don't have to be struggling because you're speaking on your topic of expertise. You know what you could say about those 3 things if you're a gut health expert. If you're a relationship expert, you can think of 3 things to say about how to have better intimacy with your romantic partner. If you're an investing expert, you know 3 things about how people should invest smartly in the stock market. You know those things because you're an expert on your subject. And you don't need to script that out in order to remember what you're passionate about, what your deep-founded knowledge and expertise is. And that's why you don't need a script. Number 1, it doesn't work. Number 2, it doesn't look good. And number 3, you're not giving yourself enough credit. You know far more than you give yourself credit for. And if we were sitting in a coffee shop having a conversation, you could tell me loads of stuff about your field of expertise. So when you get on camera, just think of this as a coffee shop conversation and just let rip with what you know. Video is a fantastic way of getting your message out into the world. And if you want to find more ways of getting your message into the world, then you want to get this book, Rise and Inspire. And this is all about how do you tell your story, find your message, and get it out into the world. So whether you are a nutritionist, that gut health expert that I'm looking for, whether you're passionate about relationships, whether there's a message about motivating youth or recognizing the disadvantaged, whatever your message is, we need to hear it in the world. And video is a fantastic medium and platform to help you do that. But it's not the only way. It's not the only tool in the toolbox. It's not the only part of your speaking ecosystem that you want to develop. That ecosystem, that's all contained in this book. Rise and Inspire is going to help you find what your message is, if you're not quite clear on it, and then what's the best way to transmit that to the people who need to hear it. Rise and Inspire is a #1 Amazon bestseller, and you can get it in ebook, paperback, or audiobook, whatever your preferred medium. I don't yet have a video copy of the book, but who knows? Maybe that'll be the next big thing in the 2020s. You can grab your copy by clicking the link in the description below. Now I'm going to move on to share with you the third and final tip of how to get started on video. And if you didn't like the first 2, you're really not going to like this one. Tip number 3. Watch it back. you've got to watch your videos back after you finish recording them. And if you thought that the act of filming them was stressful, then get yourself a comfy blanket, get yourself a strong drink, and sit down and prepare yourself for the ordeal of seeing it all happen again. This is the most difficult part of the process, and you know what I'm going to say, it's also the most important. This is where you start to identify where you can begin to improve your video speaking journey. As you watch this back and in the first minute you go, oh, why do I keep touching my face? Wow, I've just said for the 57th time. Why do I finish every second sentence with that stupid nervous giggle? You're going to see this and so much more. You're going to realize how unanimated your body is. You're going to realize how boring your voice is. And you're going to realize how jumbled and messy your message is. And all of that is absolutely fine. All of that is just the beginning of the journey. To use the analogies that we've used so far, when you just walk out your door and start running, you can't get very far before you get out of breath. When you sit behind the wheel of a car, just doing basic things like changing the gears or signaling at a junction requires so much cognitive effort. But eventually these things start to come natural for you, and eventually you start to develop that expertise and stamina to do it consistently well over a longer period of time. But you'll never get to that stage if you don't have that debrief session, watching it back and going, okay, this is what needs work. And ultimately that's what so much of the speaking journey is actually about. Doing it, performing it, isn't even half of the process. It's actually so much less than that. The moment of being on stage or being on camera, that's like the final 5%. Everything else is the background work. It's putting in the graft. It's putting in the shift to do what's necessary to develop yourself as a speaker and do what's necessary to get your message out into the world. That's the background work that very few people speak about, but that's what sets apart the amazing speakers from the speakers who never quite make it. And I want you to be an amazing speaker, because I know you've got an amazing story, an amazing message to share. And if you don't share that because the background work isn't done, then I've failed in my personal mission and my personal message to help you become that amazing speaker that you're capable of being. So get yourself on video, follow these tips, and it won't be next week, it won't be next month, but within time, you'll start to look at your videos and go, hey, I'm not bad. Hey, I'm actually pretty good. Hey, I can make a mistake or flub a line, and it doesn't freak me out the way that I used to. When I'm thinking of the next thing to say, I don't touch my face, do a nervous little laugh. I just pause and move on to the next thing. And the brilliant thing about video is the video captures this journey, and video doesn't lie. It will show you exactly what you were like 1 week ago, 1 month ago, 1 year ago. And it's a really enjoyable process to see that time point frozen on video, to be able to look back and go, hey, I'm now pretty good at speaking on video. And that's the stage that I hope you'll get to if you follow these tips.